Hello ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, which is brought to you by Shared Services Link and sponsored by Tradeshift. Today we're looking at how to manage e-invoicing globally, and I'm very excited about this webinar that we've got today as it's looking specifically at the DHL story. So looking at who's joining me today for our speaker lineup, my name is Susie West. I'm the founder and CEO at Shared Services Link, and we're being joined by Stephen Verhelfelt, who is Program Manager at Global Business Services, Finance and HR in Europe for DHL. We're also being joined by e-invoicing expert Vishal Patel, who's Senior Marketing Manager Industry Solutions at Tradeshift, and his colleague Mark McCauley, who's Senior Solution Consultant at Tradeshift. So you've got a very expert panel today. Of course, as ever, you have a significant role to play in as far as what you get out of this next hour, which is to make sure that you have your questions answered. So please do submit your questions to me. There's a box in which you just need to type your questions and submit those to me, and I will put those to our panelists in the last 10 minutes of this webinar. Let's have a look at the agenda for this session. So I'll be touching on the intention of this session and then swiftly handing over to our first guest speaker, and that's Stephen from DHL. And then we'll be looking to have a demo and a summary from Tradeshift, and then looking to take your questions towards the end of the session. Looking at the intention of this session, many shared services organisations are now moving to a global construct, and although some are specifically focusing on finance and finance shared services, many are moving to a global business services model, so looking to encompass a single structure and a single approach and a single vision for their shared services organisation across finance, HR, IT, procurement and commercial. And this is very much the construct that DHL has started the journey on. And so within these constructs, these global constructs, a lot of shared services organisations are looking to deploy technology that can indeed be implemented in on a global scale. So rather than looking for regional programs, looking for very much a global program. So it's great to have DHL giving us their view on how they'll be looking to roll out, or are indeed rolling out, electronic invoicing on a global basis. So we'll be examining how DHL is indeed doing this and how they're rolling it out in 3 phases. Now, just before I introduce our first guest speaker, I do have 3 back-to-back polls that I would like to ask you, please, just to get a read of who we've got on the line in terms of maturity and kind of current adoption of electronic invoicing. So let's start with our first of the 3 back-to-back polls. Which of the following do you actually use today? Please tick all that apply. Now, if you're a first timer on a Shared Services Link webinar, please be very aware that any of the polls that you actually participate in, we share the results immediately after, so it's great benchmarking information for you. So, which of the following do you use today for processing your invoices? Are you actually using an e-invoicing network today? Do you use scanning or OCR or data capture technology? Do you use EDI in the mix? Do you receive PDFs which are emailed to you from your suppliers or by your suppliers? Or do you actually use none of the above because you're actually operating a very manual environment today? So 64% of you have responded. We'd like to get this percentage over 70%, closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. We were at 77% of you responding there. Let's have a look at the breakdown coming up on your screen now. Okay, so a lot of you are still doing the emailed PDFs and receiving invoices in an emailed PDF format. Encouragingly, a lot of you are already using an e-invoicing network, so 51% of you are already using e-invoicing today. 46% of you are using EDI, possibly with your much higher volume suppliers, and 11% of you are not using any of the above, and obviously will get huge benefit from this session today. Okay, so fairly encouraging results there. I think that really is what it tells us, specifically looking at the adoption of e-invoicing networks already, that we've got a mature, a representation from a mature shared services organisations on the line today. Let's do the second of the back-to-back polls. Where are you in your e-invoicing journey? Please tick the one box that applies to you. We have been live with e-invoicing for well over 5 years. We have been live with e-invoicing for less than 5 years. We are just about to go live. We are evaluating e-invoicing and we're in an RFP process and looking to implement in the next 12 months. We are looking to implement in the next 24 months. We're at 52% of you responding. Please do cast your vote for me. I'll be closing the poll shortly. We're at 57%. Closing the poll, ladies and gentlemen, in 3, 2, 1. Okay, didn't quite get to 70%, but not too far off there. We're at 66%. Let's have a look at the results. So 39% of you say that you've been live with e-invoicing for less than 5 years, 14% over 5 years. 9% you're just about to go live, and so again you'll get some great shortcuts from this session. 22% are evaluating and looking to go live in the next 12 months and 16% in the next 24 months. Okay, coming up on your screen, the final poll for the back-to-backs, and we've got a couple more polls at the end of this session. So coming up on your screen, how many invoices do you receive each year? Is it 100,000 or less, 100,000 to $250,000, $250,000 to $500,000, $500,000 to $1 million, or is it over 1 million invoices that you receive from your suppliers, your third-party suppliers, on an annual basis? Please tick the one box that is appropriate to your situation. 58% of you responding. If you haven't already cast your vote, please do so. Let's see if we can get it up near the 70% mark. Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, again, let's get a read as to who we've got on the line and what kind of peer group we're working with today. So 65% of you responded. It's a fairly even spread here, which is quite interesting. Normally it's a bit more of a bell curve, but we can see 42% of you, I would say, are operating a very high volume environment with receiving over 500,000 invoices or more per annum. Right, thank you very much for all that data. And with that, I would now like to introduce our first guest speaker of today's webinar. Over to you, Stephen from DHL.
Thank you, Susie. What I would like to share with you today is, well, how we are doing e-invoicing and how we are bringing it onto a global scale. But I would like to start with giving you some background on what DHL is and how we have organized our shared services environments. I'll give you some insight in what we've done so far and what the challenges are that we faced and still are facing. New requirements that we have identified whilst doing e-invoicing and how we resolve that in terms of Tradeshift and a process for onboarding suppliers. I'll share with you the results of well, the campaigns that we have been running since the beginning of this year, and at the end I will hand over to Tradeshift persons on the call, and they will give you some insight in the platform they're offering. Maybe a quick word on myself. I've been working in a project and program management environment for the last 20 years, initially mostly in the CRM environment, the last 10 years more into finance. I'm working in the shared service center in Maastricht of DHL for the last 10 years approximately in different roles, and lately focusing on projects or programs in the P2P area in terms of invoice automation, e-billing inbounds, and so on. DHL, Deutsche Post DHL. We are a German company headquartered in Bonn, Germany, part of the DAX 30, with a market capitalization of approximately 30 billion. We are present and active in more than 220 countries, which makes us one of the most globally organized companies with a revenue of approximately 55 billion and about or almost 500,000 employees, which also there makes us one of the largest employers in the world. A significant part of that is linked to the Deutsche Post, the German postal office, and that's basically the mother company of DHL now. So in the 90s of the previous century, Deutsche Post started acquiring a number of companies like DHL Express, like XL Supply Chain, like Danzas, and so on, in order to build a logistics group with now next to the Post division, three main divisions, which is the DHL Express, the Global Forwarding Freight, and the Supply Chain division. Shared service center-wise, I'm based in Maastricht, as I mentioned. We've got two other ones, one in San Jose to serve the Americas, and one in Kuala Lumpur to serve the Asia region. And within Europe, we have two other ones, one in Central Europe, Ostrava, and one in Cologne for the German market. In terms of shared service center strategy in Europe, we still have activities in countries which mostly are related to the accounts receivables process. We have the shared service center in Maastricht, as mentioned, and we have the satellites in the Americas and in Asia for reducing our costs, playing the wage arbitrage. So in the accounting centers in the countries, it's mostly linked to proximity to DHL end customers, things that require specific language skills or local knowledge, and which involve significant interaction with the local players. In Maastricht, we are focusing on more complex processes for which the countries in itself do not have the scale to build up a team. We try to standardize and harmonize certain processes that we transition into Maastricht. And by doing that, we play the role of a kind of transition hub into the satellites in the Americas or in Asia, where we focus on cost and high volume transactions processing and playing the wage arbitrage benefits. A little bit more on the procure-to-pay organization. It's about 500 FTEs. We are running on a large number of different ERPs. As mentioned on the slide, we're running on SAP, Oracle, JD Edwards, and each of those in different templates, different instances, etc., which is still linked to a certain extent to all the acquisitions we did in the 90s and the early 2000s years. We're processing about 10 million invoices per year, and 2 million of those are DHL Express. And given the volume, we are looking into ways to increase the efficiency of processing those invoices. So, e-billing inbound, this is one of them. Implementing processes like no PO, no pay policies are contributing to that as well. Shifting to e-invoicing and what we've done so far. We started quite a number of years ago in 2007 with a different supplier, a different partner than Tradeshift, and focusing on a European scope at that moment. And that resulted now after approximately 7 years in about, depending on the month, 12,000 to 15,000 e-invoices received via that platform every month. This is roughly 30 to 35% of the supplier scope and the invoice volume scope that we handed over to that partner, which is below what we expected, as we expected to reach about 70% after 2 years. Which were the main challenges that we faced whilst doing this? There was a lot of pushback from suppliers as they had to pay in order to be allowed to send invoices to DHL, which especially for the smallest supplier was a big hurdle to take. the bigger ones, certainly if they had other customers on the same platform, were willing to pick up that cost, but the smaller ones had, well, a big issue with it, as it was increasing their cost to send invoices significantly. The onboarding process was labor intensive for us and for the partner. So there was an email campaign launched, or an email being sent out, after which follow-up calls were done by the partner. But many of those were then referred back to us, as they were not getting the decision from our suppliers to onboard to them, and so they reverted them back to us to convince or help convincing those suppliers to onboard onto e-billing. In terms of interoperability, we had a number of suppliers that were sending out electronic invoices already, however using different platform than the one we used to have, or the one that we were proposing to receive our invoices on our end, which made it often a very difficult discussion on how to get the invoice from the supplier's platform onto ours and into our box, which delayed many of the supplier integrations significantly. And lastly, also we found out that in some of the countries that were in our scope, there was a limited presence of that partner. As a consequence, a limited installed base of suppliers that would quickly generate a base volume of invoices, and a lengthy onboarding time to convince those suppliers to connect to a platform that was new in that country or in that market. All of that led basically to the decision, together with procurement, to go back to the markets and see whether that platform was still the best for DHL. So we came up with a list of requirements which had to take care of the issues we faced with the previous platform. So we were looking for a partner with a better supplier onboarding methodology, an open network, also open to interoperability with other players in the market. It should be as easy as possible for suppliers to connect and to send invoices, and preferably also free for them, in order to take away that argument to do not start sending electronic invoices to us. As we were in the meantime looking for a global solution, global coverage was very important for us, and the platform need to have some additional capabilities or functionalities. We are sending back invoice statuses, so in order to inform suppliers that their invoice has been received, has been approved, has been paid, and so on, in order to reduce the load in our query handling team, as most of the questions we get there is exactly about the status of their invoices. We are looking into PO flip functionality, where we send PO data onto Tradeshift, where suppliers can very quickly generate the invoice copying the data from the PO, which is increasing significantly the quality of the invoice data that we receive, and as a consequence also has huge benefit in the processing of the invoice on our ends. We have implemented dynamic validations, which I'll get back to in one or two slides, which is contributing to the data quality of the invoices as well, by putting some validations on the platform, reducing or enforcing suppliers to use the correct cost centers, the correct PO numbers, and so on. And it should, as mentioned, be appealing for the large ones, but also the smaller suppliers to send electronic invoices. And there is a number of ways to do that. So we have, for example, a solution where suppliers can upload PDFs and from there capture the data and submit them as electronic invoices into our systems. A few words on the Tradeshift solution. Tradeshift won that tender, and there's a few elements that were triggering that decision. They have a a wide offering in terms of electronic invoicing. All the industry standard formats are accepted. They have a wide range of transfer protocols that can be used by suppliers to interface their invoicing to the platform. So it makes that technical burden as small as possible for suppliers to interact with us. They're compliant in a significant number of countries and growing. So as we are looking into additional territories, they will try to follow that. They have an open network. They're supporting multiple languages, and they're free for suppliers, so suppliers don't have to pay to send invoices on the Tradeshift platform. There's an onboarding app also, which basically requires us to provide the vendor master data of the vendors that we want to approach to convert into electronic invoicing. And we define a campaign within that app that will, depending on the behavior of the supplier to the emails he's receiving, whether he's opening the email or not opening the email, whether he's clicking on a link or not clicking on a link, etc., take next actions by sending, depending on the behavior, another email with more information or more guidance for the supplier to take them on to the next step. That is proven to be working very successfully so far. So these campaigns run fairly independently, without too much interaction from our team, nor the Tradeshift team, and suppliers are onboarding independently. Thirdly, we have a business firewall on that platform, which is basically containing validation rules. There's a few static ones, like the invoice date, where we have restrictions of which dates can be used by suppliers. So in our case, it's no more than 7 days before or after the current date. There's also a few dynamic ones, like the PO data or the cost center data for suppliers that have been identified as a PO supplier, so their invoice should have PO. The supplier is enforced to put a PO number, and he's also, the PO number he's entering is being validated against a list of open POs that we share with Tradeshift, and if the supplier is putting a different number that is not on the open PO list, he will get notified that his invoice cannot be processed as it's not a valid PO number. Similarly, for non-PO vendors, we have a validation on cost centers, so only the valid cost centers can be entered by the suppliers. And through those validations, the processing of the invoices on our side is much more automated on e-invoice level rather compared to the paper invoices that are coming through. Fourthly, cloud scan is something I mentioned before. We do have the capability, or suppliers do have the capability to upload PDFs, and these are converted then into data, and they will go through the same validation rules as the ones I mentioned in point 3. And ensure that from the paper copies of those invoices we still get high quality data into our system. A few more words on the project scope that we negotiated with Tradeshift when onboarding on this journey. The initial exercise was focusing on Europe with 1,500 suppliers and approximately 850,000 invoices per year. We are now shifting to phase 2, where within Europe we are adding more suppliers, more countries, representing approximately 1.3 million invoices on top of that per year. And then a phase 3, which will be for 2015 and onwards, is another 1 million invoices per year. This is the Express business unit only, and we are in discussion with other business units like a global forwarding business unit to also add more volume for the non-European countries onto the platform. So these guys are on the platform for Europe, and we try to speak to them to broaden that geographic scope to the other regions as well. When we invite suppliers to onboard, as said, there is an email campaign triggered if they click on a link to initiate the onboarding process. They see the following screen, which is a customized Tradeshift DHL screen with a personalized letter from our senior manager introducing the solution, what we want the supplier to do, why we want him to do that, what's in it for him, and how we can onboard what he needs to do, and so on. All the process that we will take him through to onboard moving forward. We see for suppliers that it's a really easy exercise to do that onboarding. It's very straightforward. It's basically a few clicks that he needs to take in order to make the connection from the invite he's getting from us. And we expect through things like the PO flip, which I mentioned before, that will increase even, because then we have all the data to him in the PO. He just needs to click 3-4 times and he's connected to us, and his first invoice is returned from the PO into DHL, which is a really strong process to increase conversion of the suppliers into e-billing. So how far did we get until now? So we start the beginning of this year. We are live in 7 countries in Europe at this moment. We have a few more in campaign and in testing. And we've kicked off Italy, Switzerland and Portugal over the summer. Some of these countries have converted up to 60% of their invoice volume already in this year, within 8-9 months. And we see the invoice volume going through the platform increasing by, depending on the month, 20 to 30%. And we see, now an acceleration even after the summer holiday, that it's picking up a bit harder than, in the summer or just before. After this, we'll into the European scope, and as said, as of 2015, we'll initiate a global deployment with Express to start with, and in negotiation with the other business units within DHL, like global forwarding and so on. In terms of success, as the onboarding campaigns and the fact that they're running in an automated way is bringing significant benefits to us, because we have a relatively small team to coordinate the campaigns for all of the countries in scope, and we'll be adding more countries as we go global. So we see that the number of interactions we get from suppliers in response to the email campaigns is relatively low, and hence we can support many campaigns in parallel with a fairly small team. And there is hardly any questions from suppliers on how to onboard, so it's a fairly simple exercise for them. In terms of conversion, so as said, we had 1,500 suppliers in scope that we gave to Tradeshift in campaigns. About 50% of them have been onboarded, 3% have rejected because they didn't want to. We are in discussion now with procurement on a strategy to see how hard we can play the exercise towards those suppliers, and that depends on the supplier itself. So we are aligning with procurement on approaching those 3%, and the remainder is still undecided as they go through the email campaigning exercise as we speak. What worked really well in Tradeshift, they have a concept which they offered us, which is the CSM concept, the Customer Success Manager, where basically they've assigned a team to DHL to help us, and together with them make this as successful as possible. So they're focused on DHL, and we can share goals with them. We will discuss any issues we have, improvements we see or that we need. And secondly, the easy and flexible way to allow suppliers to connect to Tradeshift. As said, especially for the small suppliers, we see a big increase compared to the previous partner we had. it's, well, really easy for suppliers. We get that feedback on the platform already a few times from those suppliers, that it's surprisingly easy to connect. And secondly, the white glove, which is a side product from the Customer Success Manager. Basically, we have identified an ongoing list, rolling list of the main suppliers that we want to onboard. And these are the high volume invoice suppliers that are very important for us to get onto e-invoicing, because well, there will be big benefit in doing so. And we have defined a list together with them of suppliers that we want to onboard, and they take ownership of that onboarding exercise. As it's mainly the bigger ones, they want to have an EDI integration. It's not always possible for them to do one of the standard EDI formats. So Tradeshift, through the white glove exercise, supports and manages basically the onboarding of those top vendors towards us. And the only thing we need to do is sit in status meetings and provide inputs, but they manage that on our behalf, which is a huge improvement compared to the previous partner we had, and helping us a lot. That is what I wanted to share with you today, and I would like to hand over now to Vishal of Tradeshift. Over to you, Vishal.
Thank you, Stephen. Great story, and thanks for sharing. I know from the Tradeshift side, it's been really exciting working with the DHL team on this project. Just before we get into the short demo of Tradeshift, I wanted to give you a brief overview. So Tradeshift is a business-to-business platform that enables companies all over the world to transact, connect, and collaborate. We work with a number of global companies and have been very successful in onboarding many of their suppliers onto the platform. In fact, currently we have over 500,000 suppliers in over 100 countries on the platform. And the major reason that customers choose Tradeshift is our innovative approach and modern, easy-to-use technology, as you'll see from the demo in a minute. Here's a sample of some of our customers. Many of these are very large global enterprises like DHL. Archer Daniels Midland is a Fortune 27 global food processor. CBRE is the world's largest commercial real estate services firm, and the NHS, the world's largest publicly funded health service. So I've also included a sample of some of the suppliers that we work with. These are some large suppliers on our network, but as with DHL, we also cater to the needs of smaller suppliers. As I mentioned, so Tradeshift is a platform that enables buyers and suppliers to transact, connect, collaborate. From the very beginning, our platform was really designed to be open, flexible, completely cloud-based, and fully mobile. And our network of buyers and suppliers is really at the core of everything that we do. In order to provide a better idea, I'll use an example of the iPhone. When Apple introduced the iPhone, it built certain core apps like email, calendar, messaging, but they also enable third parties to build apps on top of the platform. Now, currently, there are 1.2 million apps available on the iPhone, and that's a major reason why people want to use the iPhone. So similarly, Tradeshift has built certain core apps like electronic invoicing, cloud scan, collaborative workflow, early payment solutions, but we've also enabled third parties to build apps on top of the platform and add value to buyers and suppliers. In addition to that, our customers also have the opportunity to design their own apps, and a good example is supplier registration. One of our clients saw that after using Tradeshift, they could easily automate the supplier registration process. So together with them, we designed a supplier registration app that is now available to everyone on the platform. And one last piece I wanted to share is that Tradeshift really takes a balanced approach to providing value to both suppliers and buyers. With suppliers, we really focus on ensuring that there's value for them from the very beginning. In addition to being free, we offer multiple connectivity options, great visibility into the AP process, additional benefits like accelerated payment, and profile pages that's popular with smaller suppliers. For buyers, we offer multiple capabilities from handling paper and PDF documents, as Stephen mentioned, to integrating with suppliers' systems and also to early payment capabilities. Tradeshift is interoperable with other networks, and one of the biggest value adds is that Tradeshift can easily adapt and evolve to as your company's needs evolve. So it really makes our solution future-proof. And Tradeshift naturally lends itself to quick integrations with ERP systems, and we are really obsessed with providing easy and intuitive solutions. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Mark, who's going to take you through a demo.
Sounds good. Thanks, Vishal. And so I want to go ahead and go through, 4 of the main points that we've been talking about, especially with what we've done with DHL. And in particular, from the supplier side, it's about creating that environment of collaborative e-invoicing, really to be able to give that and streamline the overall process of processing these documents. And what we see here is our normal activity stream from a supplier side, including communication from my buyer on this PO that we have in queue. And so, directly within the activity, or even as I'm managing at the document level, I have the capability to say, yes, we will process immediately. And so on both sides of this, you're able to collaborate and resolve any discrepancies or issues, or push the process forward within the platform itself, rather than having to rely on email or phone calls or those types of things. The other thing is that from within the application itself, you have the ability to view these purchase orders. And we talked about the increasing the quality of data. So the ability to do an easy one-click PO flip that takes that electronic information and flips it over into the invoice, again, to maintain the quality of the data that is brought over from the PO into the invoice. So here we see all of that data that's brought over, and we start to see some of that dynamic validation that for these invoices, there is this required order or PO number that, again, has been brought over as part of that process of the flip. And again, through review and being able to preview, see that final invoice and what it's going to look like, and ultimately be able to send it through the network to your buyer. So the other aspect of kind of that collaborative nature is we talked a little bit about being able to get immediate information about the statuses of your documents. And so here on both sides of the buyer and supplier side, we can see the status of my documents that are in my queue. And if I flip over and look at it from the buyer side, you'll also see that same view of being able to see not just the communications and what's going on with the documents, but also what those statuses are. So it's important that as you go through the statuses and as we look, being able to create that next step of providing the dynamic workflow that you need to be able to process those documents as they go through. So in this case, we've always got to-dos. I'm looking at it from a buyer's perspective, and we see that there's a number of different activities that I am required to do, from escalations to approvals, or even to be able to code the invoices that I have in queue. And key here is the ability to tap into my existing GL codes that we pull over from our buyer's system. And again, to be able to then select that information, including any other cascading information as part of the workflow. And once you are finished with that, it being able to continue on that workflow for approval, for escalation or for any other resolution as it goes through that process. The third thing that I want to quickly look at is we talked a little bit about CloudScan, about the fact that a majority of invoices that may be coming into organizations are invoices that are either paper or as an email attachment. And so with CloudScan, what we're looking at here is we're looking at the supplier validation side of a submitting of an invoice via email. And this is the actual email as we've scanned in through CloudScan. And one of the key things that you see is I see that there is, I'm logged in as the supplier. I'm able to see my invoice that's gone through CloudScan. But in the electronic form, I see that there are some required fields that dynamic validation logic that is required for doing business with this buyer. And in particular, the need to have a PO number. So I see here that I need a PO number. And it's not just if I go ahead and type in any number. In this case, the PO numbers from this buyer need to all start with 43. Maybe it's a lookup against any open POs that we've pulled over from your ERP system. But until I have put a valid PO in there, it will not allow me to proceed on. So we have a very robust means to be able to have that dynamic validation logic regardless of whether the documents are coming in electronically, whether they're being created within the system itself, or if they're coming through the process of what we're using with CloudScan. So with that, again, just kind of want to quickly walk through the collaborative e-invoicing, how we can, increase the quality of the data through a simple ability to do PO flips, how we can support the workflow and, being able to do everything from GL coding to any other approval processes that you need as part of your AP process, and then ultimately being able to help to translate and transfer a lot of that manual work that has to be done with either paper or PDF documents as part of email attachments into electronic format and getting to that point of true dynamic validation and the logic that you need to make sure that the documents that are coming in are as valid as possible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Susie, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. So let's have a look at two more polls, please, that we've got coming up here. So coming up on your screen just shortly, and then we'll move straight to questions. So do get your questions ready. We do have a lot of questions already, and thankfully we've got quite a bit of time to work through them. So coming up, last two polls for the day, please, two back-to-back polls. What is the greatest challenge that you have, that you face right now, or you expect to face regarding onboarding suppliers? Now, please do click as many as you need to that represent your situation. Is it the cost to the supplier to join the network? Is it the time and effort consumed with the onboarding process, or the perceived time and effort consumed with the onboarding process? Is it the supplier pushback because they're just generally resistant to change? Is it the lack of interoperability options that might be available to your suppliers because they're connected to another network? Or perhaps you don't know, or none of the above. So please do share your experience with us. We're only on 54% of you responding. If you need a few more seconds just to think this one through, what is the greatest challenge, or what are the greatest challenges that you are facing or you expect to face regarding the onboarding of suppliers? The cost of the supplier, time and effort consumed in many of the onboarding suppliers, resistance to change, lack of interoperability, or perhaps none of the above. We're at 64% of you responding. Let's close that poll and share the results coming up on your screen now. So the big one there, interestingly, is the supplier pushback because of resistance to change. So I think that was very clear in what Stephen was saying and also what Vishal was saying about really making it very clear as to what the benefits are to the supplier to kind of push them over that resistance and then resisting to change. And we have a few of them. It's 26% because of lack of interoperability options, 49% cost to the supplier to join. Obviously one of the benefits of working with Tradeshift is that it's a free service, and time and effort consumed with the manual onboarding of suppliers. Okay, let's look at the final poll for the day coming up on your screen now. How do you or how will you encourage suppliers to join your network? If you mandate your network to all new suppliers, again, this is multiple options, so tick all that apply. If you mandate the network to new suppliers, tick the first one. If you mandate your network, your e-invoicing network, to all your existing suppliers, so existing and also new, but existing suppliers, tick the second option. We will be asking rather than mandating our suppliers to use the network, but we won't be mandating it. It's going to be a request. If you actually are looking to reject all non-electronic electronic invoices, please select the fourth option there. Perhaps you don't know or none of the above. So 51% of you have responded there. If we could try and push that response up, please, to at least into the 60s, and I'll be closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's have a look. We were at 61% now, so it just tipped into the 60s. The results coming up on your screen now. So 69% of you say that you will be asking or requesting suppliers to use your network. 51% of you say that you will be mandating it to all new suppliers. 32% you'll be mandating it to all existing suppliers. And I'm assuming those will also be mandating it to new suppliers. 10% of you are taking a firm line here and looking to reject all non-e-invoices. So so any invoice that's not electronic will be rejected. So interesting results. Now with all of that, let's move through to questions. So if you haven't already put your question through to me, please do so. We do have a lot of questions. So let's kick off with the first one. I'll address this one, please, to Tradeshift. Vishal, question for you, please. Is CloudScan an OCR-based technology? How does it work?
Yes, thank you, Susie. CloudScan is OCR-based, but Tradeshift has built a lot of capabilities on top of this OCR base. So we've built machine learning capabilities, some fairly sophisticated algorithms that allow for the capture of the information from a scanned invoice or from a PDF invoice. And what the CloudScan solution does is continue learning from various invoices, but also from across the network of invoices. So I believe what we've been able to do is enable a fairly high level of accuracy with fewer invoices. So it takes maybe 3 to 5 invoices for the system to learn, the basics of where the invoice amount, the PO number, the line items, and so on. So it's OCR, but it's more than that.
Okay. A question for you, please, Stephen. How was volume, or how is volume discounts, or how are volume discounts handled, and how do you validate your invoices?
Well, we're not doing that on the portal of Tradeshift, so that's still going through the ERP. We just process the invoice with whatever, as they come in, and offer that to the ERP to deal with whatever discounts that need to be applied. And the other question was what, Susie?
And then invoices being validated.
Well, that's what I refer to with the validations dynamically and statically. So we provide lists of PO numbers and cost centers that are active or valid back to Tradeshift, which they validate dynamically any invoice that comes onto the platform against. And next to that we have a number of static validations like invoice dates and so on that will reject any invoice that they try to enter with an invoice date that is more than 7 days ago or more than 7 days in future.
Okay, good. So also to you again, please, Stephen, if I can direct this question. Obviously, you've been referring in your presentation that it's easy and free for suppliers. So I think there's a little bit of disbelief that something could be so kind of so beneficial for a supplier. So is just to make it absolutely clear, you're not supporting the fees for your suppliers. It's actually free to your suppliers. That's correct.
No,
yes.
we're not supporting that. So we pay per transaction fee to Tradeshift, and apart from that, well, nothing. So suppliers do not have to pay to submit invoices to Tradeshift.
Okay, good. Another question for you, please, Stephen. How collaborative has finance been with the procurement function as far as working on this particular program?
Yeah. A lot. So it's a joint effort, and that's important because whenever supplier contacts DHL, it's important to have the same message going back. Yes, it's important that you switch to Tradeshift and e-billing because blah 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 blah, all the good reasons. So they have been vital in making this a success. On the other hand, I must say that the collaboration also improved now because the number of discussions with suppliers became less as the onboarding process is much more efficient now, so they need to intervene in less situations than we used to in the past. So the buy-in from their side has increased also significantly the last year in order to make this happen on a regional, global level, but also within the countries when we, together with them, approach suppliers that have questions or doubts or do not want to. So they're vital in convincing those to onboard, indeed.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Vishal, a question for you. How long does it take to build interfaces to integrate with a customer's ERP system, if indeed an interface needs to be built?
That might be a better question for Mark, actually.
Mark, if I could put that question to you, please.
Absolutely. So as far as interfaces, we've got some existing connectors to some of the most common ERPs such as SAP and Oracle. So as part of our integration efforts with customers, it can be as short as a couple of weeks or depending on the amount of information that we're either bringing over or syncing, it could be a couple months. But typically it's in the weeks to 1 or 2 month time frame as part of any integration efforts.
Okay, good, thank you. A question for Stephen. Since implementing Tradeshift, how has the relationship with your suppliers changed? Have you seen more collaboration or satisfaction?
Well, we get feedback regularly about how easy it is to connect to Tradeshift. And well, some of them, it's really new to submit invoices electronically, so they are positively surprised. Furthermore, I'm not really into that because I'm far away in the back office finance, so I would need to check with the people having day-to-day contact with the suppliers whether there's any improvement there, but overall the feedback that we get is fairly positive, yes.
Also, Stephen, a question for you as well. You mentioned a very low rejection rate. It's very encouraging. It's 3% rejection, which is great. But the question is, bearing in mind that the service is free, what is the reason that this 3% is kind of pushing back?
Yep. So it's only 3%, but that also means that many of, well, we have 50 50% onboarded, which means there is 50% that is still in the process of the campaign as well. The main reasons why we have real rejections is because, well, companies only want to operate with one partner which is not interoperating yet with Tradeshift, or they are not able to, well, submit invoice electronically because it's very, very small company. That's, well, computer illiterate and things like that. So these are the main reasons. I think it's interrupts on other platforms and no idea what e-billing means and how it can help.
Thank you, Stephen. Question for you, Vishal, if you can take this one. It's about the kind of the geographical reach of Tradeshift. So I'm being asked if you are able to accommodate countries like Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tradeshift has offices in China and Japan. We've just recently launched a Japan office. We do have partners in Latin America that they really know all of the mandates and regulations around e-invoicing in Brazil and Mexico and Chile and all of those countries where there's fairly strict regulations, and they are on top of all of those regulations all the time. We have suppliers that are on our network that are in all of those regions already. So those 500,000 suppliers I mentioned are some of them are in many of those regions already. So and then just lastly, also with many of our customers, we are going through different phases of onboarding suppliers, and while we might start in one region, Europe, US, North America, the following phases are often rest of the world.
Okay. Question for you again, I think, possibly to Mark actually. Mark, obviously Tradeshift has in the kind of solution portfolio, you have a great workflow solution. Are you actually compatible with third-party workflow SAP solutions?
Absolutely. When we look at the overall landscape from an integration perspective, we definitely take into play the interaction with other workflow solutions that would be from SAP, Oracle, or any of the other ERPs. So that typically is scoped out as part of the implementation efforts. And again, we've worked very closely with other workflow type products out in the market, whether they're cloud-based or the traditional on-premise.
Okay, and another question for you, please. Mark, do you offer archiving for your suppliers?
Archiving, and I'm a little, since this is a cloud solution, there is, the records are always kept, and we keep them for, up to 10 years. But from an archiving solution, we work with customers to see what their retention requirements are, and by all means, we can, be able to comply to whatever their retention needs are. But really in cloud solutions, the thought of archiving and the existence of those records within the system aren't what you traditionally think about with normal on-premise systems.
Okay, that's great. I think we just time for a final question. We do have a lot of questions, and I think what we'll be looking and asking Vishal and Mark to do is to really come back to each of you that has sent through a question. Analytics, so the visuals that are provided on the Tradeshift solution are very attractive. What kind of analytics, or this is maybe a question for you, Mark, what kind of analytics do you make available if you, on the actual Tradeshift solution?
Yeah, in one of the slides you would have seen there is a screenshot of one of the dashboards and some of the dashboards that we have. But we definitely have real-time analytics and dashboards that reflect what's going on from your supplier side, from your document side, or even from your processes side. So being able to identify maybe where some of the log jams are in your overall document processes. So again, we have very robust and the same type of clean and real-time analytics that we're able to reflect, to give you visualization into all of those areas.
Great. Thank you very much indeed to Stephen from DHL and to Vishal and Mark from Tradeshift. Just to draw your attention that Tradeshift will be joining us in Atlanta in 2 or 3 weeks' time, where we're going to be discussing for 3 days global business services. So if you haven't already registered for that, it will be sold out. It's nearly sold out. I think we're literally down to our last couple of places. So if you want to join us there, please do so. If your colleagues in VAT would like to join us for our VAT compliance through SAP Control event in London, that's taking place in November. So please do join us for that. We've got 3 great webinars as well coming up for you over the next few weeks, so make sure that you look at what they might provide for you and do register for those. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time and attention today, and we look forward to welcoming you next time. Goodbye.